You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, John Hall, probably in New York, possibly in China. I really don't know by the time this comes out.
John, you're incorrigible. And me, Charles Foley, in Minneapolis.
How's it going, Charles?
It is going well. So I was reading about a conservation success story involving the banteng, which I'd like to tell people about. And now people know that the banteng is one of the species of wild cattle from Asia. And Asia, as you're well aware, has lots of really interesting cattle species with some really cool names, including the Kupre, the Gua, Tamarau, Anoa, and even the Saola, which is considered to be a small ox. And unfortunately, the one common theme among most wild Asian cattle species is that they're almost all highly threatened. So some, like the Tamarau and the banteng, are critically endangered. The Kupre, of course, was last seen in 1969, almost certainly extinct. And it looks as if the Saola, unfortunately, is also on its way to extinction. And in some cases, this is because of habitat loss, but mainly it's because of hunting. And as we know, cows are large and have a lot of meat on them, and they make appealing targets for hunters. So as a result, they're one of the very first large mammals to disappear from an area. So the banteng, it's a gorgeous animal. It's a large ox with white legs and either orange or chocolate fur, depending on the subspecies. And it's found in the forests of several East Asian countries, including Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and Indonesia. And as I mentioned, it is listed as critically endangered, having suffered population declines of over 80% in the past few decades. And it's now down to, at most, around 4,900 individuals. However, according to a recent article by Mongabay, one place where the species has been doing well, really well actually, and making a real comeback is in their Huay Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary in Thailand. So about 25 years ago, which was when you were there, John, I believe, banteng numbers were down to a few hundred individuals in Thailand. So the population has been expanding rapidly, and there are now an estimated 1,400 animals in the Huay Ka Keng Reserve, which is by some distance the largest population in Asia. And this park is an area where WCS, the Wildlife Conservation Society, has been heavily involved for many years. And they helped to increase and improve the number of anti-poaching patrols, which has mostly brought poaching under control. However, while this meant that banteng numbers started to increase, it in turn created another problem, which was conflict with local communities. And this is because banteng would leave the park and compete with livestock belonging to the communities for graze, and also because sometimes villagers would be required to remove their livestock away from the park boundaries because of the risk of disease transmission from bantengs. And all of this was leading to a lot of tension between the park authorities and local communities. So the park tried a different tack, and in 2021, they set up a community-based tourism enterprise in one of the most affected villages, with the idea being to try to bring in tourists to see the banteng and therefore provide revenue for the village. And as you might expect, at first the community was pretty skeptical that people would visit an area to see banteng, but in fact, it has proven to be a big success. Community members were given training on how to operate wildlife tours, and then the local province helped to advertise and promote ecotourism to the area. And now, several thousand tourists visit the area each year to see the banteng, which wander around like cows, I guess. And of course, there are other mammal and bird species in the reserve, but banteng is basically the main hook for visitors. And these days, there are now over 320 local community members working in tourism in the area, and more of these people are deriving either all or most of their revenue from banteng-related tourism. And obviously, these people are then ensuring that nobody harms the animals, even when they wander into areas where there's little official protection. And as a result, banteng numbers continue to increase. So this is another great example of how tourism can positively impact mammal conservation, which is something that we discuss extensively on this podcast. And heck, if it can be done for banting in Thailand, then why not for tamarau in the Philippines or anoa in Sulawesi, etc.? So anyway, it's a good news conservation story at a time when I think everyone can probably do with a little bit of good news.
Indeed, it's yeah, what a great story. I had no idea. I have not heard about this at all until you mentioned it, and this is fantastic. I was in Huikakeng, yeah, like 20 plus years ago, and I did see one banteng, the only one I've ever seen. But back then, the park was extremely strictly controlled. It was closed to nearly all visitors. I had a friend who was a scientist and was pally with the park authorities, and so they graciously let us go in for an hour's night drive, and we did see a banteng. But back then, I remember they wouldn't even let us drive into the reserve the first time I tried to go. They said there was too many elephants, it was dangerous, but you feel free to walk, which I didn't quite understand that logic. But it's clearly changed. I know there was a tiger, one or two tigers that made an appearance in a clearing in Huikakeng last year, and dozens of mainly Thai photographers turned up. There was maybe hundreds even to try and see these tigers, and they were appearing all weekend. So I imagine a lot of this is local Thai tourism rather than international people coming. And that's fantastic. It's, Thailand has changed so much since I started visiting. It's really, I think, turned the corner in the way they're protecting the wildlife. And a lot of that, I believe, is likely due to the huge increase in nature tourism among Thai people. There's Thai birders all over the place, photographers, and now more and more Thai mammal watchers. So great news. And yeah, it does show what might happen for some of those other great cattle species in Asia that are just clinging on by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, and hopefully it can be replicated over there as well. So our guest today is wildlife photographer Joel Sartore. Joel works for National Geographic, where he leads the Photo Ark project, which has the goal of photographing every species living in zoos and wildlife sanctuaries around the world, so as to inspire people to help protect species at risk. To date, this has involved photographing well over 15,000 species of animal. Joel's unique images have been widely displayed and have even been projected onto historic buildings, including St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. Joel has also contributed to numerous other magazines and books, and his work was showcased on an hour-long PBS documentary. He has received many awards for his work, including the Rolex National Geographic Explorer of the Year Award, and in 2023 he was named the Jane Alexander Global Wildlife Ambassador by the Indianapolis Prize. And in fact, that is where I first met Joel, and given his extensive travel schedule, it has taken us well over a year to get him onto the podcast, so we are very happy to finally have him here with us. Good to see you again, Joel, and welcome to the Mammal Watching Podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
It's great to meet you, Joel. I'm a big fan, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Joel, let's start off with asking the question we ask all of our guests, which is, how did you get interested in wildlife?
I had parents that cared about wildlife. And they provided me books. When I was a kid, there was no internet really, and it was books. And so in the late 60s, they gave me a book on the birds. But it was a Time Life book series. Roger Torrey Peterson, I think, might have written that one. And in the back was a section on extinction, and there was a passenger pigeon named Martha photographed dead on her perch, stuffed at the Smithsonian Museum. And so I always remembered what that chapter said, and I was really amazed that humans would have hunted something to extinction like that, which was such a populous bird, billions of them. And so it started with that. And then I always had an interest in nature. I had parents that my dad took me hunting and fishing with him and collecting mushrooms in the spring to eat. And my mother loved her backyard squirrels and birds and flowers. And so they cared, and that set me up. I went into newspaper photography, first at my student paper at the University of Nebraska, and then on to the Wichita Eagle in Kansas for about 6 years. Then I started with National Geographic in about 1990 as a general assignment photographer, and eventually worked my way into conservation, just wildlife stories, conservation stories. That's really what I wanted to do all along. But I started off as a general interest, kind of a people photographer, because they needed somebody to do funny, and I like to do humorous things, and so it worked out. Yeah, I was just fortunate on the right corner when the bus went by, really. But that's how I got started in conservation photography, and that all led to the Photo Ark eventually.
Thank you for explaining your career trajectory. But how did the wildlife photography in particular come about? Was that something you were always doing as a photographer on the side, or did you learn about that through your work?
No, since I was a little boy, I'd borrow my parents' camera and they'd take me to the zoo, either in Wichita or Omaha, where I grew up, that area, and I just took pictures of the animals. I was always amazed by them, and had clipping files as a 5 or 6 year old where I'd clip pictures out of magazines and off oatmeal cartons and wherever I could get pictures of different animals, and I'd categorize them by what type of animal, what continent they lived on, because I was a total animal freak the whole time, especially zoos. I really wanted to be a zoo director until a high school guidance counselor in Ralston, Nebraska told me that I'd never amount to much because couldn't do math or chemistry, so I could never go into the biological sciences. And so I did not, because I believed her. That's fine. I got a degree in journalism. I'm a curious person. It fit me really well. When something doesn't work out the first time, it works out better the second usually. So that's the deal. Is I really, really wanted to work with wildlife. I really did. But as a newspaper journalist, I was prepared that was going to be my career, just newspaper photojournalism, house fires and sports matches and portraits of people at big moments in their lives. And the fact that I was allowed I was given my head a bit to do what I wanted to do by a boss at the Wichita Eagle, who allowed me to do some wildlife work in Kansas. We had bat caves in the Gypsum Hills. We had bison reserves. We had prairie chickens. We had various things that I could photograph, coyote hunting, just whatever I could photograph. And I really like to fish, and that got me out all the time too. So it just happened because it's something that I was always interested in. I didn't think I'd make a living at it, but with Geographic, eventually they had entire stories that would take months just on grizzly bears, just on wolves, just on koalas, on the National Wildlife Refuge System. I've done 2 stories on the Endangered Species Act for them. So I've been involved in wildlife really heavily ever since I started for the Geographic. So that specifically is how that happened.
Fantastic. And were you writing those stories as well, or were you the photographer along with them?
No, just a photographer. I gather general caption information. I write a little bit these days, because of the books we do with Geographic. It's needed, and I don't mind writing, but it's kind of a full-time job being a photojournalist if you're in my position. National Geographic grants funds me. I'm very grateful for that, and the Photo Ark is just full-time all the time, every day of the year, pretty much.
Yeah, I can see from your Instagram feed.
Either researching for it or shooting. Mostly researching. Always have researched for a full day, just about for every day in the field. So it's a nonstop thing. It turns out it's a big job photographing every species in human care around the world. It's a big job.
Who'd have guessed?
Yes, who'd have guessed? So tell us about the Photo Ark, because obviously conservation is really important to you. At what point in your career did that idea come about? Is that something that you always knew that you wanted to do, or what was the genesis of that?
When I was doing the stories on the Endangered Species Act, especially the first story in which Douglas Chadwick and I went around, he's the writer, we went around and we looked at animals like the Socorro isopod and the California gnatcatcher, some rare minnow that lives in a stream in the desert in Nevada, a toad that lives in the Los Angeles basin. When we looked at these things, I could see finally that most species in trouble were not whooping cranes. They were not tigers. They were little things that would fit in the palm of your hand, and they were never going to get a full coverage in the Geographic, and they were never going to have a chance to have their stories told completely, to have us concentrate on these things. So because it's the little things that run the world, like we couldn't live without ants, for example. I mean, we certainly can't live without insects, but we couldn't live just without the ants. So I was more and more convinced that these little animals needed a voice. And I really admired the work of James Baylog, who did kind of some of the early work I saw in terms of animals on black and white backgrounds. And I really liked the work of David Lichtwager and Susan Middleton, who had done some real pioneering work, really concentrating on small plants and animals around the US. And I liked the way that you could really see and look in the eye an animal that only lives in muddy water, or an animal that lives in the soil, or a small animal that lives up in the tree or underneath tree bark, things that you just can't see otherwise. You can't get a good look at them. And the big deal, the secret sauce for this is, with no distractions, no size comparison, we can give each animal an equal voice. A mouse is as big as an elephant in these pictures. That was very, very appealing to me. But when I started the Photo Ark, I didn't think it would turn into this. I was just looking for something to do on the days when my wife felt okay, so I could get out of the house when she was undergoing treatment for breast cancer. That's what that breast can her getting breast cancer forced me to stop my job, where I was a Globetrotting magazine photographer, going from one story to the next, to staying home for a year, taking care of her and our three kids, and she's through it just fine. I mean, that was 21 years ago. And think about what to do with the second half of my career. I was probably 41, 42 years old. And so I thought I would really, really like to do portraits of these various animals that I don't even know if they're going to make it, because they're in such rough shape and nobody cares. And the bulldozers are rolling and we keep straining all the fish out of the sea. So the photo art got started that way, just as a last ditch effort of desperation for a guy to make something of himself, Like, I'd done 35 stories over 17 years for National Geographic magazine, but only two had moved the needle for conservation. The rest had not. And not that they were all wildlife stories, but the majority were. And so the other problem was that these stories got washed away by the next month's issue. The web wasn't really a thing yet. And so you'd have these little animals in front of the readership for a month, and then that was that. So I really wanted something more permanent, especially because extinction and the photographic record is very poor. And I could see that a lot of these species were not going to make it. Their homes are gone. And we've crowded them out. And I thought about Audubon, to be honest, when I was at home for that year, not really working. I thought about the fact that Audubon had noted in his field notes that several of the birds that he'd photographed, he didn't think were going to make it because they wouldn't be tolerated by humans. They just wouldn't. He could see them on the downside slipping just after the turn of the century into the 1800s. And I'd seen also the work of George Catlin, the Native American painter, and Edward Curtis, who right at the beginning of European settlement was given a grant by a banker on the East Coast to go document Native Americans, knowing that, and all three of these guys could see that European settlement was really going to change things in a profound way, good and bad, but for Native Americans, it was hard. It's tough. And for species like the passenger pigeon and the Carolina parakeet and the great auk and the ivory-billed woodpecker, these birds just could not do it. They just couldn't get through it. Their needs were too specialized, or they were seen as a crop pest and a threat to settlers. So I could just kind of see this change coming, and I still can. So I see myself as a witness, in a way, to what's happening to the six classes of animals that I document, which is mammals and birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrates. I can really see that it's not going to work out well for them. So I'm hoping the Photo Ark wins hearts and minds and gets people to pay attention to something other than fighting with each other and the price of gasoline and who won the ball game, which we're completely preoccupied by all the time.
So your focus is on photographing animals that are in captivity, and you have photographed well over 15,000. How many are you up to?
Well, we're nearing 18,000 now.
Nearing 18,000 animals.
Right.
That's a crazy number.
And just to define it for you, where I work is anywhere where animals are passing through human hands. The goal is to just is to show what biodiversity looked like at this point in time before we started losing everything. It's animals in zoos, aquariums, wildlife rehabbers, captive breeding centers, private collections. It could be a bird banding where animals are going through human, just so we can control them and get them into my shooting tent, into my little cloth tabletop tent. It could be a stream sampling or a bioblitz. Lots of different places where animals are controlled for, even if it's just a few minutes. We can get them isolated on black and white. Just a very few pictures are taken. They're in a soft cloth shooting tent if they're small, and then the tent's opened up and they're released. So very cool, as stress-free as I can make it.
And how do you actually make that decision? How do you decide, okay, these are the animals that I want to photograph next, and then how do you actually go about trying to actually find people who can put you in a place where you can actually photograph those animals?
Good question. So I have been into this the whole time I've been a journalist, and before I knew what the Omaha Zoo had, and I knew what the Wichita Zoo had because I've been going there over and over again. Just kind of knew it. Not maybe a complete inventory, but kind of knew what their collections were and where they were strong. Like Wichita started out with a really strong collection of reptiles. It was one of the first houses they built, one of the first collections they built there when the zoo was new in the 70s. And I went there first. So I just kind of knew that. And then as I've gone along, I have met other people who are really into going to zoos, or they're top birders in the country, or they work on bird banding crews, or like I have friends with the Tennessee Valley Authority who every year do a stream sampling, a different section of river in one of the 9 states that TVA administers in terms of power production. It could be, I'm going to Mudbug Mania this year, which is in Kentucky. And it's people that care about crawfish or crayfish, mud bugs. And they go out doing collecting, some for their university collections to study, and some they put in museum collections. So I go out when these guys are going out in May and hang out with them for a couple of days and photograph what they catch. They're doing it anyway. So it's every place I can think of. But in terms of zoos, which is more interesting in how we get to them, it's a long process. It's months. We have a pitch that's basically an elevator pitch that people can read at their leisure in their office. It shows how we do the work. We show a big tent for big birds, a small tent for lizards, frogs, small birds, up to duck size, I guess. We show how we do animals that are strong with teeth, like in a cage system. Or for big animals like tigers or ungulates, big grazing animals, the zoo has to prep a room to white or prep a room to black. So it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of coordination. And at first it was hard because they're like, you want us to do what? And now it's like, oh yeah, the Photo Ark, we dig that. The vast majority of zoos and aquariums around the world know of the project now. We share, and we have benefits. We're grant funded. There's no cost where we go. We give every place we work free images to do with pretty much as they want. And it's good lift. If you get on with us, I mean, we can really, through the Geographic Disney media platforms, books and magazines and exhibitions and projections and the web, of course, we can really give lift to places. We can really tell the stories of these species and these facilities well. So we're not political. We're just trying to do the best we can, showing these animals looking good and telling the world, who is taking care of them, who is the steward of this species. And a lot of times I wanted to touch on zoos too. Nobody likes a bad zoo, but the zoos where we work predominantly are really good. And they are the only reason a lot of these species exist that are down to nothing. They're the only place where you can see a lot of these species. And if it weren't for these zoos, the species would be gone. Good zoos also do a great job in terms of educating their visitors. They have their visitors for an average of 3 hours, usually on a weekend. And their signage and their interpreters and their docents do a really good job of keeping people connected. If everybody just wants to say, okay, nature exists on my phone or on my laptop, and that's it, we're not going to save anything. Because most older people alive today grew up playing in a body of water that maybe doesn't exist anymore, or the parents don't feel it's safe for the kids to go to a city park by themselves, as we did. So this is a big issue. How do we keep nature important to the masses, to the public? How do we get politicians in there that think about all the issues I do, which is everything from saving black-footed ferrets to stop pouring poison all over your lawn, plant a pollinator garden. It's all kind of wrapped into the same bundle. Geez, that was a long answer to a short question. I'm sorry I'm dominating the conversation.
No, it's great. And just to add to what you were saying about zoos, there's also the fact that zoos are kind of the one place where all segments of society visit.
That's right.
And whether they're rich, whether they're poor, whether they're like politically of one aspect or another, everyone goes to zoos. And
That's right. That's right.
many people they may not read a Geographic magazine or watch a Discovery Channel, but everyone goes to the zoos and everyone's got little kids. And so it's the perfect place to actually be able to get your message across.
It is. As children, they go. Right. Mm-hmm. So that really forms a deep bond. My bond was at SeaWorld. I got splashed by Shamu, the killer whale in San Antonio. I could not believe it. So there's a connection there. But yeah, I mean, I'll work anywhere. I have to. I'll go to a bad zoo. I mean, if they have the only one of something, but it doesn't mean that we have to give them a lift, doesn't mean that we have to celebrate them. It's that the race is on for me to try to get species while they still exist in these facilities, to see them, to actually see what they looked like. And good zoos to me are really good partners for this type of thing, because they really are working to keep the public engaged with nature and conservation. What everybody doesn't, I don't know that anybody thinks about this really. I mean, I do, but it's really folly to think we can doom all these other species to extinction, but that we'll be okay. It ain't going to work that way. It's just not, especially the insects. I mean, we have to have them, and they're really, really vanishing quickly. They call it the insect apocalypse. So for people that are listening today, I know this is the mammal podcast, but I mean, if you like birds, you need insects. Birds feed their chicks insects, not seeds. And so without insects, you don't have birds. And so that means planting a pollinator garden with nectar-bearing plants for monarch butterflies as well. It's a really good thing to do. We do that at our office and here at our home. And we put signs in so people walking by can see prairie in progress. Why plant prairies? Each sign's different. They're about the sign of a size of a for sale sign you stick in your yard if you were selling your house. So people see these 4 panels and they're educated as to what they're looking at. We mow around the edge so they can see it's tended. But we want people to understand that it's in our hands now. The saving nature has to be intentional. It's not accidental anymore. You can't take it for granted that you're going to have all these lovely creatures forever if we don't step up and save spots for them. It's really about habitat, whether we want to save mammals, birds, all of it. We have to provide them habitat. It can't just be giant cornfields that have nothing else in them but that crop, or golf courses that don't have anything other than manicured, heavily chemicaled grass. It just can't be that way if we want to have a stable planet.
Obviously, we completely agree with everything you're saying. It's so important, and also insects for bats as well for the the mammal people. Sure. Yes. Speaking of which, if you ever want to join a bat catching trip anywhere and get pictures of some of the incredible diversity, we know people all around the world who I'm sure would love to have you along for their trips, and they always catch a ton of different things.
I would love that. Yeah. The hammerhead bat in the Congo.
Yeah.
Male hammerhead bat. That is one of my white whales there.
Oh, I know where to go for that one. Okay. And also on zoos, I think another thread of this podcast, and we've talked to many very distinguished conservationists, scientists, and a lot for so many of them. Going to the zoo was a formative moment in what sort of changed what created their career path and took them to where they are. So it really does inspire people.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan. Going back to the photography, you have such a distinctive style, which I'm sure people know, and we'll put a link to the Instagram feed in the notes. But how did that come about? Did you invent that technique?
No, I did not invent it. I mean, I looked a lot at other people's work. Avedon photographed elephants against a plain background, way in the 50s. So I'm not the first, I'm not the last. It'd be fine with me if lots of other people were doing this. Anything we can to row the boat forward a little bit, get people thinking about how important nature is to our own survival. But also, I just think these animals are amazing and beautiful works of art. So why throw them away? And by the way, I photograph rare or common, big to small. They don't have to be rare for me to photograph them, just everything. But in terms of how the pictures look and the technique, it's pretty straightforward. It's Elinchrom heads because each head has a power pack of its own. That's really an important thing to me because these lights get dropped in shipping on airlines, or maybe they get blown over in the wind. If I have a set of 4 and one blows over and breaks, which I really try to prevent, then I can still use 3. I can photograph an animal with one light if I had to, just directly over the top. But I use this a cloth tent to soften the light, to get the light to kind of wrap around these animals with Elinchrom heads, which are super durable and great. Now they have battery powered heads, which is fantastic. So I don't have to have a generator if I go into the field on a bird banding, let's say. And then, I'm just trying to look for a little moment, just where the animal's looking at me. And most of the animals I photograph are born and raised in human care, in zoos and aquarium. They're like, especially zoos. They've been around people a lot. So I am just looking for them to look back at that little camera lens they see in the front of the tent. They're all sealed in, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes per color. We can go pretty quickly. So they look back at the camera, stand there. They can't judge distance in there. So, they're not running around mostly. And so they just look back at the camera and that's it. The lights freeze the action. And that's it. There's not a lot to it other than persistence. That's about it.
I think you're being very modest. I've tried this technique, and there's a lot to it when I'm behind the camera. You talked earlier about, before we started recording, about the influence Audubon has had on the way you try and capture animals. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. Well, Audubon painted birds under tension. He was the first artist. This is way before photography. He was the first artist who really he did sketches of these animals in life. He was a really good naturalist in terms of observing these animals. Then he'd shoot them. So, I mean, not ideal, right? Then he would paint these animals overnight before their colors faded, and he would hang them on wires in his hotel room. He would hang them on wires so they'd be in these poses like he'd seen and jotted down in his notebook. And they were usually under tension. They were usually moving. They were in mid-step, or they were looking back cautiously. They were talking to each other. It's birds communicating. It's ground squirrels communicating. They were looking at each other. They were more than just what had been painted before, which are pretty stiff, kind of one-dimensional animals standing up on a perch, And so he was really the first person to paint in the right botanicals, the right plants that these animals used for cover and for food, a lot of them. So he was the first one that really painted animals as they appeared in nature. He was the first artist to do that I know of. And he did it extremely well. And then when he became adult-minded, when he was older, his son took over for him. And that is my plan as well. I don't know that I'll become adult-minded, early word for dementia, but my son Cole has been going with me on all the foreign shoots for many, many years, and he'll take over when I can no longer do it. We're leaving for Europe, Western Europe, in fact, on Monday. So it's important to have somebody who can follow up if you do a project that will outlive you. And that's what we've got going here. And that's what Audubon did as well. His son, John Woodhouse, took over for him when he couldn't do it anymore. They were starting in on the mammals at that point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it makes me tired just thinking about it.
And so take you back, because when you were describing photographing these animals, put them in front of the screen, they all behave, but I can imagine some of these reptiles, some of these insects, etc., are incredibly difficult to photograph. Sometimes
we use a containment tent for small animals. It has a black liner and a white liner in it. Put the animal in on white, take pictures, then slide the white out through the bottom so we don't have to handle the animal again. Photograph the animal on black, and literally that tent can be taken back to wherever that animal came from and opened up or a keeper can collect them up however they want, shift them back into a transport kennel. So for small animals that are flighty, let's say a lizard, especially a gecko, which could drop its tail. That's the defense mechanism, to drop its tail and it wiggles. And so the predator goes after that and the body gets away. I found that using a clear plastic cup for an insect, even a bee, which are very busy, you can still them underneath this cup. It's just a cup. It's not airtight or anything. It's got little holes in it for air. Put the cup over them and let them calm down. Just takes a minute. And then lift that cup up, macro lens, click, 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 put the cup back down. It's not, I mean, it took a long time just to learn that, but for insects, especially, I want them kind of 3/4 sideways so you can look them in the eye if they have eyes. A lot of animals, sponges, corals, anemones don't. Moles have eyes so small you can barely see them. But for non-mammals, for insects, for lizards, for example, for snakes, sometimes if you can still them, they're all pretty smart. It's just there's no direct threat. They're just hanging there. They're just sitting there. A lot of animals, like lizards, let's go back to lizards, they're camouflaged, and so they believe that nobody's seeing them. If things are quiet, the lights are off. I mean, my flashes are on, but they don't have a modeling light going ever. So the lights are off. I can still see to focus a little bit. Lift that cup up, and the lizard usually stays there, posed really, really perfectly. Not always, but it's just a matter of being patient, and calm. I think they know that. I mean, most animals are very quick, especially mammals and some of the birds, the corvids, the jays, the citizens, parrots. They just understand that there's no harm going to come to them because we're calm and we're not laughing. It's not a party. We're quiet. We're respectful. And we just try to get done as fast as we can. Just, a couple minutes per animal oftentimes. So it's very chill. I don't want anybody laughing in the room. I don't want anybody talking in the room. We can, unless the animal's just like an ambassador animal that gets taken to grade schools to show off. That animal's going to be pretty bulletproof and just want treats, and we can put them right in the middle of wherever we are, whether it's a room with a big white sheet on the wall or it's inside a tent. We can pretty much park food motivated animals on a dime. So that even grazing animals, we can put them right where we want them to be because we put food right in the middle of the room.
Joel, do you ever go to watch animals in the wild for fun and take pictures? And if so, what are some of your favorite experiences?
No.
Really?
No, isn't that something?
Yeah.
So I did 17 years, as I mentioned, 35 stories for the Geographic, all in the field.
Yeah.
So let me put it to you this way. If you were gone more than I was home, didn't even meet my kids when they were growing up, sadly. I mean, they all love me. I love them. They all live close by. They're all grown and gone. But let's say, John and Charles, do you guys like chocolate? Do you like chocolate?
Do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. What if you worked in a chocolate factory and you got the ones that were misshapen were free? Take all of them home you want. Eat them all day long. Do you think that you would like chocolate as much? I don't know that you would. And so for me, of course, if I'm out in my little rowboat on my little bass pond doing catch and release, if I see a kingfisher, I'm thrilled and delighted. I go out and watch the sandhill cranes every other year or so out along the Platte River. So yeah, but I'm not a birder. I'm not going out in the field looking for a glimpse of something I would rather see it right in front of me, lit well for posterity. Geographic is backing us on a nonprofit that we're doing, an endowment to offer the work up to the world in perpetuity. All these animals are going to stick around for as long as we humans do. And so I really get a front row seat. I can really see them. And I think they're all glorious and incredible works of art. I mean, we stand guard over these works of art in museums. And when a painting gets stolen off the wall of a museum, we talk about it for years and years. Oh my goodness. But we'll throw these animals away to extinction, something as exquisite as an okapi or any bird you'd ever see, any mammal, any bird, a bat. How incredibly complex I'm amazed bats can do what they do, and everybody should be. Shockingly amazing. And so when we throw these things away to extinction, I just cannot stand that. I can't stand the thought that something's down to nothing. I documented Hawaiian birds over the past couple of years, little forest birds. They are in real trouble. And I just can't stand it. I just cannot believe it. And at the same time, I realize that nature really doesn't need us, but we need it. So when we're all gone, however we end, I mean, nature will come roaring back. During the pandemic, I did insects for a couple of years because couldn't really fly anywhere. And I just put lights and sheets up on my back porch here in near downtown Lincoln, Nebraska. And there were all sorts of insects, more than 100 species that came into those sheets over the course of the first summer. So nature's there and it's waiting. It's waiting for us. But in terms of going out in nature, to look for animals in the wild, I did that for a long time, and it's hard. It's really hard to get a good picture of some animal out in the wild. I mean, people use camera traps now on carcasses or on bird feeders or whatever, and that makes pictures very interesting. But no, And I know that sounds horrible, but it's the truth, man. I worked at the chocolate factory too long, you know. I really like the Photo Ark and how we do that. We can really get a good look, a good long look, and that's good. That scratches the itch for me.
It's good to hear. Slightly worrying because this is my last day of work today, and tomorrow I will be in the chocolate factory. And I'm worried now from what you said. This is my fear that all of a sudden I'm going to stop enjoying what I've loved for the last.
No. I mean, I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I mean, but see, when you're working for National Geographic magazine, they can't publish your excuses. You have to have great pictures of these animals. I mean, up close and personal, and like really do need to do an outstanding job. It's not enough to just do a long lens picture of a bird on a perch. If you are a birder or a lister, I completely get that. I could get into that, keeping lists. I mean, I'm very, type A, compulsive.
Yeah.
I could totally see doing that, but it's too late for me. Like, I'm 63. I'd never established, but if I were a lister, I'd do it great. I'd really want to. And I'd enjoy it. I really would enjoy it. But I don't have enough time to do the Photo Ark and go out in nature. Plus, I'm still married to my first wife, man. And there's a reason for that. Like, 42 years this summer. It's because I work and I get out of the field and I come home and I fix the kitchen cabinet door or whatever I'm supposed to do, mow the lawn. So I try to be respectful and not be gone more than half the year. And if I was suddenly this guy that wanted to go see an ivory gull because it showed up along the west coast of California, no, I would not be able to stay married. And I love my wife and I don't want to get divorced. And so I do my Photo Ark thing that takes up my time, and that's enough. That's okay. That's fine. But you're gonna go twitching tomorrow, John? Is that what they call it? Twitching? Birding?
I'm gonna go mammaling around the world. Yeah.
Mammaling around the world?
Yeah, to try and see more things from my list and run tours but a lot of it's about conservation as well. So that's what I tell myself and other people for sure.
And you have a mammal list. You're a lister.
Yeah.
Mammal?
2,404 species in the wild.
That is awesome. Yeah. That is great. I've never heard of that before.
Oh no, it's the thing. This is a mammal watching podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So John is the world's top mammal lister. He has seen more mammals than anyone else in the wild. And just to let you know, John has been living in the chocolate factory all of his life and been eating the offshoots all of his life and is just as addicted as he was when he was at the start.
That is awesome.
Absolutely. And so it's a
that is cool. I hate to sound like such a moron. I should have studied up, man. but before I got on this, I had repaired the lawnmower. I had swept the walks here. We have company coming at 1. I had packed all my gear, which I just dumped in my living room, all spread out like 2 weeks ago when I got home. I picked all that up. I got up at 6. I got all my stuff done. So, but this is it. This is incredible, John. That is the #1 mammal lister. That is so cool.
Yeah. Well, I also have 2 ex-wives, and now after hearing what you did for yours, I begin to understand why. So.
Well,
but just to come on that, there is still so much out there in the wild. In the last 3 years, we have probably discovered or rediscovered about 5 or 6 species of mammals. And a lot of it is because we have new tools. We have thermal imagers. We're going out at night. We're looking for these things, etc.
Yes.
So we're always trying to open up new areas that we can go to. And when we're there, we then try and see if we can promote the areas, get money into these local communities, because sometimes it doesn't require a whole lot of tourists to go to an area, to bring money into an area, for those people to take pride about what they've got, and then to stop the hunting and to say, okay, yes, we're going to look after these species. So that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, I had a firsthand experience with that. And the first time I went out of the country for the Geographic, it was in Madidi National Park in Bolivia. And that's back when jaguars really hadn't been photographed except by accident if they were along a river eating a caiman and didn't flush off of it when the boat went by. So we had a guide that was a hunter, and he called a jaguar into a clearing for me. And I tipped him. I mean, I gave him like $100. We had a good long viewing. And I think it came in 2 nights for us. And when I tipped him, something in him shifted, and he said, I could only get 14 or 15 bucks for its skin in town. This is a long time ago. This is 30 years ago, and he was in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon. He said, are there more people like you? And I said, yeah, there are. And I continued to send people down that way, as when I could. It's kind of a remote place. Now it's pretty easy to see jaguars in the Pantanal. But, he was so taken by that. I literally could see him change his attitude. And I know through following up on him over the years that indeed that's what he became, was a wildlife guide, because he realized that jaguar could pay him again and again and again. So the power of ecotourism, and you're right, it doesn't take a lot of funding to get somebody into things, or to get somebody to realize that what they have is precious. Another example, Dr. Ludwig Seifert in Uganda works out of Queen Elizabeth National Park. The guys that were cattlemen were pushing their cattle into the parks where there was lots of grass, because everything's nibbled down to nothing on the outside of the park. And they were poisoning carcasses that they'd find one a lion had killed, they'd poison it, and then it would kill not only the lions and the hyenas that would stop by to feed, but it would kill the vultures as well. It would kill everything. So he quickly realized that if he involved these guys and turned them into ecotourism people, that they would get out of cattle, which didn't pay anything anyway, and they'd make real money showing people that leopards and hyenas and lions, and that's worked out for him, But that's a really classic example of how something's worth far more alive than dead, and far more than just raising cattle. So there's real hope. I mean, I started this podcast with you guys talking about how hard everything is and woe is nature. Well, look at the things that are being done. And I never get depressed or anything, because I meet too many people that work on the front lines of this all the time, like you guys. I mean, I pop into a place, I'm a voyeur, I photograph what people have, and I'm gone fast. With you guys, what is needed to really turn things around, and you're doing that. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. That really is.
Yeah, and when it works out, it works great. One of our most heartwarming stories was a couple of years ago. We went to West Papua looking for a long-beaked echidna, which hadn't been seen by scientists for 50 years. Went to a village we were the first foreigners ever to visit there, found the echidna, and now 2.5, 3 years later, they're getting hundreds of people visiting. They have stopped all snaring, because in case a snare kills the echidna, they've renamed themselves the Klalik Echidna Park. Yeah. And other places that may eat echidnas, but in Klalik Village, no one's going to touch an echidna. So this stuff really works.
That is fantastic. That is lovely to hear. That's the best thing I've heard all month. That's great. I'm serious. That's fantastic. Yeah. There's not a lot of good news stories out there, where I'm going after the last of this and the last of that. So I love hearing this. This is fantastic.
So a final question for you. I know that lots of young people are interested in getting into wildlife photography, conservation, filmmaking, etc. What sort of advice would you give to someone who wants to go into that field?
Great question. And I get asked that a lot by journalists, like, how do I get into this? I always tell people, well, pick something you love. Pick whatever it is. It could be food insecurity or homelessness. It could be spay and neutering dogs and cats, could be getting house cats indoors. Don't let them go outdoors. Whatever it is, whatever you're passionate about, pick something. Odds are in your town, there's going to be somebody else or a group that are already doing that work. Then you become very, very valuable to them by volunteering. Become so good they can't afford to ignore you. Eventually, you will move up in the organization if you're just persistent. Now, this takes years. You notice I haven't mentioned making your living with photography. I've not mentioned that yet. I really think it's more important to figure out what you love. Be good at photography, certainly, but then use photography as a tool to help that organization or help your cause. If you pick something you love, you'll stick with it. You'll stick with it. And so that's the big thing, is figuring that out for a young person, figuring out what it is you love, how you'd like to make the world better, and then a life of service to where you're really trying to not worry about the money. Of course, you got to pay your bills, but try to volunteer there and just start in. There's no real game plan. Certainly, it's very difficult now to make your living shooting day rates for newspapers and magazines like I used to do. But there are lots of grant-funded organizations that are doing very, very good work, very passionate work to try to make the world better. And I really think if you're endeavoring at something that makes the world better, that's everything. The money will happen if you get really good at something, but that's everything. If you can just really figure out what you love doing or what you care about deeply, and then work to help preserve that or enhance it, that is the big deal. So to me, it's not so much about photography. It's about trying to do your best with what little time on earth you have. You know, all you got's a little dash between the numbers on your tombstone. So try to do the best you can. Go as fast and hard as you can at that. Do all you can right now with what you got. Maybe a little frustrating for you that you're not making a living in photography. Now, I know a few people that still do that, but it's hard to compete with free, and the web is full of free, great pictures. So I just say, follow your passion. And I mean, the saddest thing, I live on a pretty busy street here, and I see all these people going by in their cars and their trucks, and they're looking at their phones or what, you know. I bet 90% of them don't really care for where they're going in the morning. You know, when they come home from work, they're glad to be through with it. You know, like it's the weekend. I don't know what day of the week it is usually. You know, I just think every day should be great. Every day you should do all you can. And I try to enjoy every day. I really do. So, and I come from nothing. I had good parents, and that was everything actually. But we didn't have money or anything. And I just, my grades weren't that good, but I stick with it. You know, persistence. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful advice. And having said that was the last question, I do actually have one more question for you.
Sure.
If there's one animal that you could photograph that you haven't been able to all these years, what would it be? Do you have a sort of holy grail of the species that you want to photograph?
Yeah, Javan rhino.
Right.
And Saola.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 And for birds, it would be the Ivory-billed woodpecker. I did a story on the search for that bird years ago. And there's a few that I would really love to get. You know, we want what we can't have. There's a move afoot in Indonesia to try to establish a Javan rhino breeding center, which would answer that. But, you know, it's just typical. You know, that's why I'm so fascinated with extinction. You know, I went to the Australian Museum 2 months ago, and a friend of mine used to be with Geographic Comms. She runs communications there, and she was like, you should spend a half day, your last day before you fly out of Sydney. She's come and see me. We'll have lunch, and I'll show you our collection. I'm like, yeah. I gotta get more animals in the photo art. She says, Joel, we got a baby thylacine that's perfect in a jar of alcohol. I was like, really? She said, yeah, it's the largest one preserved in fluid too. It's 3 months old. It was nursing. You can see the indentation I'm like, so I went, and you know, they keep it in a safe, locked away by itself in the safe, and they bring it out, and it looked like it was just sleeping, but it was killed. Its mother was killed, and it was killed in 1866, and it looks like it just is sleeping. It's perfect. And that was a very moving thing for me to see something like that. And just to think about the animals that we've lost. I mean, we went to Hobart also, and the site where the last thylacine died is there, but it's not a zoo anymore. And you just think it's so epic to lose an animal. It's profound in a way I can't even describe. And I just do not understand why we don't care more. Why wouldn't we care about this? Forget the fact that we could all go too if we eliminate enough of these species. It's just, to me, it's just tragic. And we really, really should care more deeply about the environment. That's my whole thing. It's been that way since I was a little boy. It'll be that way till the day I die, I suppose. But nature is amazing and wondrous and good for us, lowers our blood pressure. It's all these things. We all want to believe that nature will be there. I say that saving nature from this point on must be intentional. We must devote actual time and resources to this, or we'll live in a very impoverished world. As David Quammen called it, we'll live in a planet of the weeds, the species that are very durable, that can thrive under any conditions. Want that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does, but I appreciate what you guys do. And I'm so glad I was able to be on this podcast. I'd heard about it for a long time. So I appreciate your interest in having me on.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us. I know how busy you are. It's taken ages to organize this, but what a thrill to have you on. You started where you finished, about the importance of having parents that loved you and good parents. And I remember, I think it was one of the Nobel Prize winning economists whose students asked him what advice they would have for him, and he said, "Choose your parents wisely." And I think you are an example of that. And the other thing, that you've said it again and again, and it's so important, that it's about protecting what we have left, being intentional, and valuing the stuff we're losing. And when you were talking about artwork being destroyed and the uproar, it reminded me of when Notre Dame burnt down, and it's a beautiful building, but the whole world was in grief, and the money that was flowing in, and yet that's something that can be rebuilt. And every day we lose things that, in my mind, are far more precious. Yes. And no one talks about them. So thank you so much for reminding people about this, and all the amazing work you're doing. Keep on doing it, capturing, documenting the world one animal at a time. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joel, I completely second what John says. And thank you indeed for having set up the Photo Ark. I know my daughter absolutely loves every time you post a photograph, and she always sends it on to me. So you're inspiring a whole new generation of people. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you both.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.